The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I was reviewing quarterly projections when my phone lit up with my mother's name. I hesitated before answering, my stomach already knotting with familiar dread. 3 missed calls in. The past hour meant only one thing. She needed something, and that something usually involved my bank account. What I didn't know then was that this particular call would set off a chain of events that would permanently reshape our relationship and force me to finally stand up for myself after 34 years of giving in. And before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rachel? My mother's voice came through sharp and impatient. I've been calling you all morning. What's so important that you couldn't pick up? I bit back a sigh. Hi, Mom. I'm at work. I have a presentation in 20 minutes. I glanced at my computer screen where the unfinished slides mocked me. Well, this is more important than your little presentation, she said dismissively. Your father and I have made a decision. We're retiring. Next month. I froze, my pen hovering over my notepad. My parents were only in their early 60s. Dad 62, Mom 61, and as far as I knew, they had practically nothing saved for retirement. The house they'd lived in for 30 years still carried a substantial mortgage because they'd repeatedly refinanced to pay off credit card debt. That's sudden, I managed. What's the plan for income? That's why I'm calling, sweetheart. Her voice softened into the honeyed tone I recognized all too well, the one she used when she wanted something significant. We've figured it all out. Your father will get his pension, though it's smaller than we'd hoped, and we'll have Social Security. But there's a gap of about $2,500 a month. The knot in my stomach tightened. And you're going to cover it, of course, she said, as if stating the obvious. It's the least you can do after everything we've sacrificed for you. I closed, my eyes fighting the familiar wave of guilt and resentment. This wasn't a new conversation, just a new variation on a theme that had played throughout my life. When I needed braces as a teenager, I was reminded for years about the financial burden I'd placed on them. My college tuition, mostly covered by scholarships I'd worked tirelessly to secure, was still described as a sacrifice they'd made, despite my student loans that I was still paying off. Mom, that's a lot of money. I don't know if I can... Rachel Elizabeth Carter, she cut me off, using my full name like I was a misbehaving child instead of a grown woman with an MBA. What do you spend your money on anyway? No husband, no children, that fancy apartment downtown, all those expensive clothes? Meanwhile, your parents who gave you everything are struggling to make ends meet. What my mother didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone, was that for the past 8 months, I'd been quietly working with a lawyer to purchase my parents' house through foreclosure. 3 missed mortgage payments had triggered the process, something they'd conveniently failed to mention during our weekly Sunday dinners. I discovered it by accident when a notice meant for them had been mistakenly mailed to my apartment, because I'd once helped them with a payment and my address was in the system. Rather than confront them directly, which experience had taught me would lead to denial and accusations, I'd decided to buy the house myself through an LLC my college friend turned attorney, Olivia, had helped me establish. The plan was to let them continue living there, paying what they could actually afford with proper financial management. The process had drained my savings and maxed out my home equity line of credit. I need to finish this presentation, I said, avoiding a direct response to her demand. We'll talk about this at dinner on Sunday, okay? I need to look at some numbers and see what's possible. She huffed, clearly dissatisfied with my failure to immediately agree. Fine, but don't forget to bring that bottle of wine your father likes. The one from that winery in Sonoma we visited last year. The winery trip that I'd paid for as their Christmas gift. Sure, Mom, I've got to go now. After hanging up, I stared blankly at my computer screen, the presentation forgotten. My colleague Denise poked her head into my office, her expression concerned. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile. "Just family stuff, nothing new." But it was new. This wasn't a one-time request for help with a car repair or an unexpected medical bill. This was an open-ended commitment to fund their lifestyle, a lifestyle they couldn't afford and hadn't planned for. And they'd made this decision without any conversation with me, simply assuming I would bankroll them indefinitely. Somehow, I made it through my presentation that afternoon, though I couldn't recall a single question asked or answer given. My mind was consumed with calculations and scenarios, none of them promising. Even with my director-level salary at the financial consulting firm where I'd worked for the past 6 years, an extra $2,500 a month would mean significant changes to my own financial goals. The condo I'd been saving for would have to wait. The student loans would take years longer to pay off. Later that evening, I called Olivia, my attorney and oldest friend, who had been helping me navigate the complex foreclosure purchase. "They want me to fund their retirement," I told her after explaining my mother's call. "They have no idea I'm about to become their landlord." Olivia was quiet for a moment. "This complicates things. The closing is scheduled for next Friday. You're sure you want to go through with it?" Did I? The question hung in the air. I'd committed nearly every spare dollar I had to this plan, convinced it was the right thing to do. My parents, for all their flaws, didn't deserve to lose their home. But now, faced with their expectation that I would also fund their daily expenses, indefinitely doubt crept in. "I don't know," I admitted. "But what's the alternative? Let the bank take their house? Where would they go?" "That's not your responsibility, Rachel," Olivia said gently. "They're adults who made their own financial decisions." "Bad decisions," I corrected. "Still their decisions. Look, I'm not telling you what to do. Just think about what this means long term. This isn't just about money. It's about boundaries." Boundaries. The word itself felt foreign when applied to my relationship with my parents, especially my mother. From childhood, it had been made clear that their needs and wants superseded my own. When had I ever successfully maintained a boundary with them? "I'll think about it," I promised, though we both knew I would proceed with the purchase. "How's Jake?" Olivia allowed the subject change, updating me on her husband's recent promotion and their plans to finally start trying for a baby. As she talked, I felt a familiar pang. Not exactly jealousy, but a wistfulness for the normal life milestones that had eluded me. At 34, my longest relationship had lasted just under 2 years, ending when Mark grew tired of my constant unavailability. Due to family emergencies and work demands, both Olivia and my younger brother Michael had managed to build lives with clear boundaries separating them from our parents' chaos. I was the only one still enmeshed, the designated fixer. Sunday arrived too quickly. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' modest 2-story colonial in the suburbs of Chicago, the bottle of overpriced Cabernet in a gift bag beside me. The house itself was lovely, or had been, before years of deferred maintenance took their toll. The shutters needed painting, the gutters sagged in places, and the once meticulous garden was now mostly patchy lawn and overgrown shrubs. Dad had always enjoyed gardening before his back problems began 5 years ago. My younger brother Michael's car was already there, which was a relief. Having him as a buffer might make the conversation marginally easier, though he'd made it clear years ago that he wouldn't be pulled into our parents' financial dramas. Smart man. "Rachel's here," my mother called out as I entered using my key. She appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her face lighting up at the sight of the wine bag. "Oh, you remembered." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I forced a smile, allowing her customary cheek pat that passed for affection. How could I forget? The house smelled wonderful. Pot roast, Dad's favorite. And I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. This was home, with all its complications. The place where I'd grown up, where Christmas mornings and birthday celebrations had unfolded alongside arguments and tears, and the constant grinding stress of financial instability carefully concealed from neighbors and friends. Michael emerged from the living room, beer in hand, and gave me a quick hug. "Hey sis, fair warning. They've been talking about cruise brochures all afternoon." I raised an eyebrow. "Cruises? On what planet?" He shrugged, lowering his voice. "Mom says you're coming through with retirement funding. That true?" "We're discussing it today," I said carefully, "but no decisions have been made." Michael gave me a knowing look. His relationship with our parents was less complicated than mine. He'd established firm boundaries early, moving to Milwaukee after college and limiting his visits to major holidays and occasional Sundays. He'd made it clear he wouldn't be the financial safety net, and surprisingly, our parents had accepted this from him in a way they never had from me. "Don't let them steamroll you," he warned. "You know how it goes." I did know, all too well. Dad was in his recliner watching a golf tournament, his thinning hair now completely gray. He smiled warmly as I entered, genuinely pleased to see me in a way Mom never quite managed. "There's my girl. How's the business world treating you?" "Same as always," I replied, bending to kiss his cheek. "How's the back?" He waved dismissively. "Good days and bad. Nothing to fuss over." That was Dad, minimizing health concerns until they became emergencies, avoiding doctor visits until absolutely necessary because of the cost. His pride had prevented him from addressing his back problems properly years ago, and now chronic pain was his constant companion. Dinner was pleasant enough on the surface. Mom had outdone herself with the meal: pot roast with all the trimmings, fresh rolls, and a chocolate cake for dessert. But beneath the normal conversation about neighbors and Michael's work project lay a current of anticipation. They were waiting for me to bring up retirement funding. I chose to address it as we were finishing the main course, setting down my fork deliberately. "So, you mentioned retiring next month. Talk me through your financial plan." Mom brightened, as if this were a normal financial discussion and not a massive life decision made without proper planning. "Well, your father's pension will be about $200 a month, and we'll both start taking Social Security. We've crunched the numbers, and with your help covering the $2,500 gap, we'll be just fine." "And the mortgage?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. My parents exchanged a quick glance. So brief I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching carefully. "We're working that out," Dad said vaguely. "Working it out how?" I pressed. "The payment is what? $600 a month? Is that included in the gap you're asking me to cover?" Mom's smile tightened slightly. "Rachel, don't get bogged down in details. We've always managed, haven't we?" "Actually, no," I said carefully. "That's why I'm asking. Because I know about the foreclosure notices." The silence that descended on the table was absolute. Michael looked up sharply, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. "Foreclosure? What foreclosure?" Mom's face flushed, then paled. "Where? Did you hear such a thing? That's private information." "Is it true?" Michael asked, looking between our parents. Dad sighed, shoulders slumping. "We've fallen behind on some payments. It's temporary. Once we get the retirement sorted out—" "3 missed payments isn't temporary, Dad," I interrupted gently. "The bank has initiated foreclosure proceedings. They've sent multiple notices." "You've been snooping through our mail?" Mom's voice rose indignantly. "How dare you?" "One of the notices was mistakenly sent to my address," I explained, maintaining calm despite my racing heart. "I'm still listed as a contact from when I helped with payments last year." "So, you've known about this and said nothing?" Michael's tone held accusation, though whether directed at me or our parents wasn't clear. "I've been handling it," I said simply. Handling it how? Dad asked, confusion evident in his furrowed brow. This was the moment. I took a deep breath. I've been working with an attorney to purchase the house through foreclosure. The closing is set for Friday. Silence again, heavier this time. Mom's face went through a series of expressions: shock, confusion, and finally, something like outrage. You're buying our house? Behind our backs? I'm saving your house, I corrected. The bank was going to sell it at auction. This way, you can stay here. As what? Your tenants? Mom's voice dripped with disdain. Paying rent to our own daughter for the house we raised our family in? As opposed to being evicted by the bank? I countered. Yes, you would pay. What you can actually afford based on your real income, not what you wish you had, or what you're hoping I'll contribute. Michael set down his fork. Wait, let me get this straight. You're about to lose the house to foreclosure. You didn't tell anyone, and now you're upset that Rachel found a solution that lets you stay here? It's not a solution, Mom snapped. It's a power grab. She's using our misfortune to take control. The unfairness of her accusation took my breath away. I've spent every penny of my savings and taken out loans to do this. How exactly am I benefiting? You'll own a house, she shot back. Our house. A house I don't want and can't afford to maintain alongside my own place. My carefully maintained composure began to crack. A house that will be a financial burden to me for years, but I'm doing it anyway because I don't want you to lose your home. Dad placed a calming hand on Mom's arm. Catherine, let's listen to what Rachel's proposing. Before we react, Mom shrugged off his hand but fell silent, her expression stormy. I pulled a folder from my bag. I'd prepared for this moment, though not for this exact scenario. The plan is straightforward. I create an LLC that purchases the house from foreclosure. You stay here, paying rent that's calculated based on your actual retirement income, not including any contributions from me. All rental income goes directly to maintaining the property, taxes, and insurance, not to me personally. And if we can't afford whatever number you decide is fair, Mom challenged, then we adjust. The goal isn't to make money, it's to create a sustainable situation where you can stay in your home with a payment you can actually manage. I slid another document across the table. This is a basic budget based on the retirement income figures you've shared, showing what's realistically affordable. Dad picked up the paper, studying it through his reading glasses. His expression grew increasingly troubled as he reviewed the numbers. These figures? They're accurate? I nodded. Based on what you've told me about your pension and social. Security expectations, yes. It's not enough, he said quietly. Not for the life we've planned. That's why we need Rachel's help, Mom interjected. We've given everything to raise our children. Now it's time they supported us in our retirement. Michael made a small noise of disbelief. Mom, no one's saying you shouldn't be supported if you need it. But there's a difference between helping in an emergency and funding a lifestyle you haven't saved for. We couldn't save, Mom's voice rose defensively. Everything went to raising you two, to giving you opportunities we never had. This was the narrative she'd crafted and clung to for decades, that every financial struggle was the noble sacrifice of parents putting their children first. The reality was more complicated. Yes, they'd provided for us, but there had also been the new cars every few years, the kitchen remodel they couldn't afford, the timeshare in Florida that now sat unused because they couldn't afford the maintenance, fees. I understand that, I said carefully, and I'm not abandoning you. I'm trying to help in a way that's sustainable for everyone. The house purchase is part of that plan. By becoming our landlord, Mom said bitterly. Having us ask permission to paint a wall or plant a garden in our own home. It was about to not be your home at all, Michael pointed out. Rachel's trying to help. Mom turned on him. Of course you'd take her side. You always do. I'm Not taking sides, Mom. I'm looking at the reality of the situation. The reality, she shot back, is that your sister has gone behind our backs to take control of our home while we're vulnerable. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the beginning of the anxiety that often accompanied these confrontations. But something was different this time. Perhaps it was the months spent working toward a solution, or the financial commitment I'd already made, or simply the accumulated weight of years being the designated fixer without acknowledgement or gratitude. Whatever the cause, I felt my spine straighten and my resolve harden. Mom, Dad, I love you both. But I won't sit here and be accused of taking advantage when I've liquidated my savings and taken on debt to prevent you from losing your home. I gathered the documents, returning them to my folder. The closing is Friday. You have two choices. Accept this arrangement and work with me to create a sustainable plan for your retirement, or find another solution by then. But I need to be clear about something. I will not be providing $2,500 a month indefinitely for your retirement. That's not happening. The finality in my voice surprised even me. Mom stared, momentarily speechless, a rare occurrence. Dad cleared his throat. Rachel, honey, we appreciate what you're trying to do. We do. But surely we can find a middle ground? Maybe you help with the mortgage until we sell the house, and then we downsize to something more manageable? It was a reasonable suggestion, one that should have been implemented years ago, before the foreclosure process began. The time for that plan was before you missed multiple payments and damaged your credit. Now, your options are limited. So we're at your mercy, Mom said bitterly, dependent on your charity. The unfairness of her framing stung, but I refused to be baited into an emotional response. You're at the mercy of the financial decisions you've made and the current reality those decisions have created. I'm offering a solution that lets you stay in your home. If you prefer a different solution, you have until Friday to implement it. Michael gave me a subtle nod of approval, his expression a mix of surprise and respect. I'd never stood firm like this before, always giving in to avoid conflict or to ease the crushing guilt their disappointment inevitably triggered. I think I've lost my appetite, Mom announced, pushing away from the table. Excuse me. She left the room, her exit lacking the dramatic flourish she usually employed when feeling wronged. Dad looked after her, then back at me with a complicated expression. She'll come around, he said without conviction. She just needs time to process. We don't have much time, I reminded him gently. Friday is 4 days away. He nodded, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. I know. And Rachel, thank you for trying to help, even if we're not making it easy. After dinner, I helped Dad clear the table while Michael loaded the dishwasher. Mom remained upstairs, her absence a palpable presence in the kitchen. As I was preparing to leave, Dad pulled me aside in the hallway. Your mother won't admit it, he said quietly. But we really have no other options. The foreclosure. It's real, and it's happening faster than we expected. I know, Dad. The retirement plan, the cruises, the travel, that was her idea. I tried to tell her we couldn't afford it, but you know how she gets when she sets her mind on something. I did know. Mom's capacity for magical thinking, particularly around finances, was legendary. So what now? He sighed deeply. We accept your help. I'll talk to her, make her understand this is our best option. I wasn't convinced he would succeed. Mom's pride was as formidable as her determination, but I nodded anyway. I'll call you tomorrow to discuss next steps. As I drove home that night, a strange mix of emotions swirled within me. Anxiety about the confrontation, yes, but also something unexpected. Relief. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had stated my boundaries clearly and stood firm despite the emotional fallout. It didn't feel triumphant or liberating exactly. The situation was still too fraught for celebration. But there was a quiet certainty that I had finally done what was necessary. Not just for them, but for myself. Michael called as I was parking, at my apartment building. "Well, that was something," he said without preamble. "Too much?" I asked, suddenly second-guessing myself. "Not at all. That was long overdue, Rach. I'm proud of you." His approval shouldn't have mattered as much as it did, but hearing it loosened something tight in my chest. "Thanks. I'm not sure it will stick, though. You know how they are." Maybe not. But something was different today. You were different. I considered this as I rode the elevator to my 15th floor apartment. He was right. Something had shifted, not just in how I'd responded to them, but in how I felt about my own worth and voice in this lifelong dynamic. "I want to help them," I told him. "I really do. But not at the expense of my own future." "Exactly. And you found a way to do both. They're lucky to have you, even if they don't see it yet." After we hung up, I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the Chicago skyline glittering against the night sky. The life I'd built here, my career, my home, my independence, had been hard-won. I'd clawed my way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs, worked 70-hour weeks to prove myself in a competitive industry, saved aggressively despite frequent financial emergencies from my parents. For so long, I'd carried the weight of their expectations and disappointments, measuring my worth by their shifting standards. But standing in my home, looking out at the city I loved, I realized with sudden clarity that I was done living that way. Whatever happened with the house, with their retirement, with our relationship moving forward, one thing had permanently changed. I would no longer sacrifice my own well-being on the altar of their approval. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Your mother wants to talk tomorrow. Can you come by after work?" I typed my response carefully. "Yes, but my position hasn't changed. See you at 6. Setting down my phone, I felt strangely calm. Tomorrow would bring another difficult conversation, no doubt, but for tonight, I had done enough. I had taken the first step toward a healthier relationship with my parents, and, more importantly, with myself. Whatever came next, I would face, it standing firmly in my own truth. The next morning, I woke before my alarm, my mind already racing with preparations for the day ahead. My conversation with my parents had gone differently than expected. I'd finally stood my ground, but the aftermath remained uncertain. I knew my mother well enough to recognize that her silence wouldn't last. She was regrouping, planning her counterattack. I followed my usual morning routine: coffee, workout, shower, trying to maintain normalcy despite the churning in my stomach. Just as I was applying mascara, my phone rang. Olivia, my attorney. "Morning," I answered, tucking the phone between my ear and shoulder as I finished my makeup. "You're up early." "I've been going through the final paperwork for Friday," she said, her voice tense in a way that immediately set off alarm bells. "Rachel, there's a problem." I set down the mascara wand. "What kind of problem?" "I just got off the phone with the bank's attorney. Apparently, your parents came in yesterday afternoon and made a payment." "They what?" I nearly dropped the phone. "How?" "They don't have that kind of money." That's what I'm trying to figure out. It wasn't enough to stop the foreclosure completely, but it has delayed the process. They've been granted a 30-day extension. My mind raced. Where had my parents suddenly found several $1,000s? And why make a partial payment now when they'd ignored multiple notices before? "This changes our timeline," Olivia continued. "We can still proceed with the purchase, but not this Friday. And honestly, Rachel, I'm concerned about where they got the money." So was I. My parents' financial desperation had led to questionable decisions before: loans from predatory lenders, maxing out credit cards with astronomical interest rates, even borrowing against Dad's pension once. Whatever they'd done to get this money, I doubted it was sustainable or wise. "I need to talk to them," I said. "Find out what's going on." "Tread carefully," Olivia warned. "This feels like a deliberate move to derail your plan." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to process this new development. What were they thinking? The partial payment wouldn't solve anything long-term. It would only delay the inevitable while depleting whatever resources they'd managed to scrape together. With a sigh, I finished getting ready for work, though my mind was far from the client proposal I needed to complete by noon. I'd have to wait until this evening to confront my parents as planned. In the meantime, I had a job to do. The day crawled by in a fog of distraction. Twice my boss, Elena, had to redirect me during our team meeting, and I narrowly avoided sending an email with glaring errors to our biggest client. By 5 o'clock, I was mentally exhausted from the effort of compartmentalizing my personal crisis, while maintaining professional competence. "You don't look so hot," remarked Denise as we rode the elevator down together. "Still family drama?" I nodded, not trusting myself to elaborate without unraveling. "Need a drink before you head over." There, my treat. The offer was tempting, but alcohol would only dull my thinking when I needed full clarity. "Rain check. I've got to handle this with a clear head." "Sure thing, but call me if you need backup or bail money." She winked, but her concern was genuine. The drive to my parents' house felt interminable, each mile ratcheting up my anxiety. What would I find? Would Mom be in full defensive mode? Would Dad back her play as he usually did? And most importantly, where had they gotten the money for the mortgage payment? As I pulled into their driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked at the curb, a sleek black Audi that screamed money and status. Visitors? Now? I sat in my car for a moment, gathering my composure, then made my way to the front door. Instead of using my key as usual, I rang the doorbell, suddenly feeling like a visitor myself in the home I'd spent my childhood in. Dad answered, his expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Rachel, come in." He glanced nervously over his shoulder. "We have company." I stepped inside, hearing voices from the living room, Mom's animated tone alongside a deeper male voice I didn't recognize. Dad led me through, his movements stiff with tension. Mom sat on the sofa beside a man in his early 60s, impeccably, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked up with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Rachel, perfect timing. Come meet Edward Harrison." "Edward, this is my daughter Rachel." The man rose smoothly, extending a manicured hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Rachel. Your mother has told me so much about you." I shook his hand automatically, my mind racing to place him. Not a relative, certainly not a friend from their social circle. "Nice to meet you," I managed. "Edward is a financial advisor," Mom explained, her voice honey-sweet. "He's helping us sort out our retirement planning." A financial advisor? Since when did my parents consult professionals about money? They'd spent decades dismissing my suggestions that they work with a certified planner. "Is that right?" I said, taking a seat across from them. "What firm are you with, Edward?" A flicker of something discomfort crossed his face before his professional smile reasserted itself. "I'm independent. I specialize in retirement solutions for clients with complex situations." That didn't sound reassuring. "What kind of solutions?" "Rachel," Mom interjected, "don't interrogate Edward. He's been incredibly helpful. In fact, he's already helped us make our mortgage payment to stop the foreclosure." I turned my full attention to the man, assessing him more carefully. Expensive watch, designer tie, shoes that cost more than my first car. Everything about him screamed successful, or at least the appearance of success. How exactly did you help them make that payment? I asked directly. Well, he shifted slightly. I arranged a bridge loan against some of their assets to provide immediate relief while we implement a more comprehensive strategy. What assets? The question slipped out before I could modulate my tone. My parents didn't have assets substantial enough to secure any legitimate loan. Mom jumped in before Edward could answer. Our retirement accounts, of course. What retirement accounts? I asked, genuinely confused. As far as I knew, Dad had a modest pension, and Mom had cashed out her small 401k years ago to renovate the kitchen. Edward cleared his throat. Perhaps this is a family discussion I should step away from. No, please stay, Mom insisted, placing a hand on his arm. Rachel should hear about the wonderful opportunity you've presented. That word, opportunity, sent a chill down my spine. In my experience, financial opportunities presented to vulnerable seniors rarely benefited anyone but the presenter. I'd love to hear about it, I said, forcing a neutral tone. Edward straightened his already perfect T. As your mother mentioned, I specialize in helping clients in transitional periods. Your parents have a valuable asset in their home equity, despite the current difficulties. I've arranged a private loan against that equity to address the immediate foreclosure issue, with terms that allow for flexible repayment once their investment returns materialize. Investment returns? What investment? We're using part of the loan to invest in Edward's exclusive client fund, Mom explained, practically glowing with excitement. It guarantees 12% annual returns, minimum. Within 5 years, we'll have more than enough to repay the loan and fund our retirement. My blood ran cold. This had all the hallmarks of a scam. Too good to be true returns, targeting financially vulnerable seniors, high-pressure tactics disguised as exclusive opportunities. That's fascinating, I said, maintaining a calm I didn't feel. Could I see the paperwork for this loan and investment? Just out of professional curiosity. Edward's smile tightened imperceptibly. The documents are quite technical. I find most clients prefer to leave the details to the experts. I'm a financial consultant, I reminded him. The technicalities won't be a problem for me. Rachel works for Manning and Associates, Mom added, apparently thinking this would impress him. Something shifted in Edward's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or concern. Manning and Associates was well known in financial circles, particularly for our forensic accounting work with fraud victims. I'd be happy to walk you through everything, he said smoothly, though I noticed he didn't offer to actually show me the documents. But perhaps another time. Your parents and I were just finalizing some details. Actually, I said, I think now would be perfect. Dad, could you get the paperwork you've signed so far? Dad looked uncertainly between Edward and Mom. Well, Robert doesn't need to trouble himself, Edward interrupted. I have digital copies of everything. He reached for his sleek leather briefcase, extracting a tablet. As he tapped through screens, I caught Dad's eye, trying to convey a silent message. This isn't right. Edward turned the tablet toward me, displaying what appeared to be a loan agreement. As you can see, the terms are quite standard. A 5-year balloon payment structure with interest-only payments for the first 2 years. I took the tablet, scrolling carefully through the document. My suspicions deepened with each clause I read. The interest rate wasn't stated directly, but buried in a complex calculation that worked out to over 18%. The investment opportunity was referenced but not detailed, directing to a separate agreement I didn't have access to. Most concerning, the collateral wasn't just the house, but all current and future assets of my parents. This is predatory lending, I said bluntly, looking up from the tablet. Edward's professional demeanor didn't slip. I assure you, everything here is completely legal and above board. Legal doesn't mean ethical, I countered. This loan structure would be underwater from day one. And where exactly is this investment fund registered? I don't see any SEC information. A flash of irritation crossed his face before he recovered. As I mentioned, it's a private investment vehicle for select clients only. The returns speak for themselves. Do they? Can you provide audited performance reports for the past 5 years? Rachel, Mom interjected, stop treating Edward like he's being interrogated. He's doing us a favor by including us in this opportunity. I turned to her, struggling to keep my voice level. Mom, this isn't a favor. This is a textbook predatory scheme targeting financially vulnerable seniors. The loan terms are exploitative, and I'd bet anything this exclusive investment opportunity doesn't actually exist. Edward closed his briefcase with a definitive click. I see this was a mistake. Not everyone is equipped to recognize exceptional opportunities when they present themselves. He stood, straightening his suit jacket. Catherine Robert, perhaps we should continue our discussion another time when your daughter is more receptive. Mom looked panicked. No, please don't go. Rachel doesn't understand. I understand perfectly. I cut in, also rising to my feet. And so does Mr. Harrison. He understands that I'm about to expose his scheme and potentially report him to the authorities. Edward's smile vanished completely. Be careful making accusations you can't substantiate, young lady. It could be legally problematic. I'm not concerned, I replied evenly. My firm has excellent contacts at both the SEC and the State Attorney General's office. They're always interested in these kinds of operations. We stared at each other for a long moment. A silent battle of wills. Finally, he turned to my parents. I'll be in touch if you decide to proceed without interference. Mom followed him to the door, apologizing profusely. Dad remained seated, staring at his hands. When the front door closed, Mom stormed back into the living room, face flushed, with anger. How dare you? Do you have any idea what you've done? That was our chance to fix everything. I stood my ground. That was a con artist about to swindle you out of whatever equity you have left in this house and potentially put you in an even worse financial position than you're already in. You don't know that, she insisted. Edward has helped dozens of people like us. He showed us testimonials. Of course he did. That's how these scams work. They show you what you want to see. Wealthy, happy retirees singing their praises. Did you verify any of those testimonials? Did you check if his investment fund is registered? Did you have anyone review that loan agreement before signing it? Dad finally looked up. We didn't sign anything yet, he said quietly. Thank God for that, I exhaled in relief. Only because Edward wanted to meet you first, Mom snapped. He said family support was important for success. Well, you've certainly ruined that. Mom, listen to yourself. A legitimate financial advisor would never press you to sign quickly, discourage family involvement, or promise guaranteed double-digit returns. These are literally the red flags we warn clients about every day. So now you're the expert? Because you have some fancy job in the city? We've been managing our lives just fine without your judgment. I gestured around us. Have you? You're 3 payments behind on your mortgage. You have no retirement savings. You were about to sign away your future to a con artist in a nice suit. How exactly is that managing just fine? Mom flinched as if I'd slapped her. For a moment, genuine hurt replaced the defensive anger in her eyes. I immediately regretted my harsh tone, if not the substance of my words. Catherine, Dad said, softly. Rachel might be right about this. Some of what Edward was saying didn't quite add up. Not you two, Mom sighed, sinking onto the sofa. I thought we were finally going to have a solution, a way to enjoy our retirement without being a burden. The vulnerability in her voice caught me off guard. For all her manipulation and denial, this was the core of her anxiety. The fear of being a burden, of losing independence, of facing a retirement diminished by financial constraints. I sat beside her, softening my approach. Mom, I want you to have a good retirement too, but not like this. Not with schemes that will only make things worse. Then what? She asked, an edge of desperation in her voice. We can't afford to. Stay here. We can't afford to leave. What options do we have? The option I've been trying to offer, I said gently. Let me buy the house through the LLC. You stay here with an affordable rent based on your actual income. We work together to create a realistic budget for your retirement. Dad reached for Mom's hand. It's a good solution, Catherine. Better than anything else we've found. She withdrew her hand, not ready to concede. And what about travel? The things we've worked our whole lives to enjoy. We work that into the budget where possible, I said, though I knew most of their travel dreams would have to be scaled back significantly. Maybe not luxury cruises immediately, but there are affordable options we can explore once we stabilize your situation. Mom rose abruptly, pacing the living room. So we just give up? Accept a diminished life because of a few financial setbacks? It's not giving up, I countered. It's facing reality and making the best of it. And honestly, Mom, these aren't just a few setbacks. This is the culmination of decades of financial decisions. Oh, here we go, she said bitterly. Lecture time from perfect Rachel who never makes mistakes. I bit back a retort, reminding myself that her anger came from fear. I make plenty of mistakes, but right now, I'm trying to help you avoid one that could cost you everything. A tense silence fell over the room. Mom continued pacing while Dad watched her anxiously. I waited, giving her space to process. Finally, she stopped, arms crossed defensively. So what happens now? With the house? The payment you made bought us some time, I explained. Olivia, my attorney, says the foreclosure is delayed 30 days. We can still proceed with the purchase through my LLC, just with a new timeline. And where exactly did the money for that payment come from? I asked. The question I'd been wondering since Olivia's call this morning. Mom and Dad exchanged a glance. Dad sighed. We cashed out my life insurance policy. My heart sank. Dad, no. That policy was supposed to protect Mom if something happened to you. We didn't have a choice, he said simply. Edward convinced us it was the right move to unlock capital for investment. I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing this new blow. The life insurance might not have been substantial, but it was one of the few responsible financial steps my parents had taken. Now it was gone, spent on a temporary reprieve and nearly funneled into a fraudulent investment scheme. What's done is done, I said finally. Let's focus on moving forward. I still believe the LLC purchase is your best option, but ultimately, it's your decision. Mom sat heavily on the armchair across from me. And if we refuse? If we don't want our daughter to be our landlord? I met her gaze directly. Then you'll need to find another solution within the next 30 days. The foreclosure will proceed. You'll lose the house. And I won't be in a position to help financially because I've already committed my resources to this plan. It wasn't a threat, but a statement of reality. I'd liquidated investments, taken a loan against my 401k, and maxed out my home equity, lined to fund the house purchase. There was no plan B in my financial reserves. The silence that followed was different from before, heavier, laden with the weight of unavoidable truths. Dad reached for Mom's hand again, and this time she didn't. Pull away. We need time to think, Dad said finally. I nodded, understanding their need to process everything without my presence. That's fair, but don't take too long. Olivia needs to know how to proceed. As I gathered my things to leave, Mom spoke again, her voice smaller than before. How did we get here, Rachel? This wasn't how it was supposed to be. The question seemed more rhetorical than directed at me, but I answered anyway. One decision at a time. But that's also how we'll find our way out. One decision at a time. She nodded almost imperceptibly, not meeting my eyes. It wasn't acceptance exactly, but it was something other than outright rejection. Dad walked me to the door. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for stopping us from making another mistake." "Call me tomorrow?" I asked. "Let me know what you decide." He promised he would, and I left, emotionally drained but cautiously hopeful that perhaps, finally, my parents might be ready to face their financial reality. The drive home was quiet, the car radio off as I processed the evening's events. Edward Harrison. The name bothered me, tickling some memory I couldn't quite place. As I stopped at a red light, it suddenly clicked. A case study we'd reviewed at work last year about senior financial exploitation. Different name, but the same tactics. Right down to the promise of exclusive investment opportunities with guaranteed returns. The moment I got home, I called Olivia, filling her in on everything that had transpired. "Jesus," she breathed when I finished. "They nearly fell for that? Do you want me to report him to the authorities?" "Not yet," I decided. "Let's focus on securing the house first. Once that's done, we can pursue Harrison." I took photos of the documents he showed me. "Smart," she approved. "What do you think your parents will decide?" I sighed, kicking off my shoes and sinking onto my sofa. "I honestly don't know. Logic says they should accept my offer, but pride might lead them to refuse." "And if they do refuse?" It was the question I'd been avoiding. "Then they lose the house, and I lose a significant chunk of my savings for nothing." Olivia was silent for a moment. "Rachel, I have to ask, why are you doing this? After everything they've put you through, why risk your own financial security to help them?" It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly over the past months. "Because they're still my parents," I said finally. "And because I need to know I did everything I could, even if they reject it. I need to be able to live with myself." "You're a better daughter than they deserve," she said softly. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, turning her words over in my mind. Was I a better daughter than they deserved? Or was I simply caught in a cycle of codependency that benefited no one? My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "How did it go tonight?" I called him instead of texting back, needing to hear a friendly voice. He answered immediately. "That bad, huh?" "Worse," I replied, then explained about Edward Harrison and his predatory scheme. Michael swore colorfully. "They never learn, do they? Always looking for the easy way out." "I think they're scared," I said, surprising myself with this insight. Retirement is finally real, not some distant concept they can ignore, and they're facing it completely unprepared. That doesn't excuse nearly falling for an obvious scam. No, it doesn't. But fear makes people do desperate things. Including you, he pointed out gently. Risking your savings to bail them out. That's different, I protested. Is it? You're acting out of fear too. Fear of seeing them homeless, fear of having to pick up even more pieces if they completely crash. His words hit uncomfortably close to home. Was my plan to purchase their house truly generous? Or was it, as Mom had accused, a form of control? A way to finally force them into the financial responsibility they'd evaded for decades? I don't know anymore, I admitted. I thought I was doing the right thing. But what if she's right? What if I'm just using their vulnerability to take over? Rachel, stop! Michael's voice was firm. You've spent your entire adult life trying to fix their messes. You've given them money, time, emotional energy, often at the expense of your own needs. This house plan isn't a power grab. It's the last resort of someone who's tried everything else. His certainty steadied me. Thanks, Mikey. I needed to hear that. Anytime, sis. That's what little brothers are for. Occasional wisdom between annoying the hell out of you. We talked a while longer, strategizing about how to handle whatever decision our parents made. When we finally hung up, I felt more centered, more certain of my path forward regardless of their choice. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with an email notification. It was from Dad, sent from the account I'd helped him set up years ago and that he rarely used. The subject line was simply, "Thank you." The body of the email was brief. "Rachel, your mother won't admit it yet, but you saved us tonight. I've been uncomfortable with Edward's proposal from the beginning, but you know how persuasive your mother can be when she sets her mind to something. I've done some research since you left. Edward Harrison isn't even his real name. I found warnings about him online under different identities, all targeting seniors with exclusive investment opportunities. We will accept your offer to purchase the house. It's the right solution, even if it's hard for us, especially your mother, to accept. I'm sorry we've put you in this position. You shouldn't have to rescue your parents, but I'm grateful that you're willing to try. Love, Dad." I read the email twice, tears welling unexpectedly. This was a side of Dad I rarely saw, the man who existed beneath the acquiescence to Mom's stronger personality, the father who recognized the truth, even when it was painful. I typed a simple reply. "I love you too, Dad. We'll figure this out together." Setting my phone aside, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not the desperate hope that somehow everything would magically work out, but the grounded hope that comes from facing difficult truths and beginning to address them. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, convincing Mom to fully accept the plan, restarting the purchase process with Olivia, creating a realistic budget for my parents' new financial reality. But for tonight, Dad's email was enough. One small victory in a long, complicated battle. As I drifted toward sleep, I realized something important. By standing my ground, by refusing to enable further financial self-destruction, I wasn't just helping my parents. I was finally helping myself, breaking free from patterns that had defined our relationship for too long. Whatever happened next, that truth would remain. The morning after Dad's unexpected email, I woke feeling oddly refreshed. Despite the emotional marathon of the previous day, his acknowledgement, rare and precious, had lifted a weight I hadn't fully recognized I was carrying. For the first time in months, I moved through my morning routine with something approaching peace. My optimism dimmed slightly when I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from Mom, all after midnight. No voicemails, no texts, just the notification of attempts to reach me while I slept. I considered calling back immediately, but decided against it. Whatever storm was brewing could wait until I'd fortified myself with coffee and mental preparation. As I waited for my coffee to brew, I called Olivia to update her on Dad's email. "That's a huge step," she said when I finished. "Especially for your dad to go against your mom that way." "I know, I'm still trying to process it." "So we're moving forward with the purchase?" "Yes, but I'm worried about Mom's reaction. Those late-night calls don't bode well. Want me to be there?" "When you talk to them," Olivia offered. "Sometimes a neutral third party helps keep emotions in check." It was tempting. Having Olivia's professional demeanor and legal expertise might indeed diffuse potential conflicts. But something told me this conversation needed to happen without outsiders, even well-meaning ones. "Thanks, but I think this needs to be just family." "Could you prepare the paperwork, though? I want to have everything ready to go." "Of course. I'll have it by tomorrow afternoon. And Rachel, be careful. Your mom sounds like she's in panic mode." After hanging up, I texted Dad, "Got your email. Thank you. Olivia is preparing paperwork. Can we meet tomorrow evening to go through everything?" His reply came almost immediately. "Yes, but you should call your mother. She's upset." No surprise there. I sighed, finished my coffee, and dialed Mom's number, steeling myself for whatever hurricane I was about to weather. She answered on the first ring. "Finally," she said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "I've been trying to reach you all night." "I was asleep, Mom. It's what people normally do at midnight. What's going on?" "Your father has lost his mind. That's what's going on." Her words tumbled out in a rush. "He sent you that email without discussing it with me first." He made promises he had no right to make. I closed my eyes, summoning patience. "Dad said you both agreed to accept my offer to purchase the house." "He had no right," she repeated, voice rising. "This is my home too, and I won't be bullied into giving it up because you two decided behind my back." "Mom, no one is giving up anything. That's the entire point of this arrangement, to keep you in your home. As your tenant, living at your mercy, having to ask permission to paint a wall or plant a flower." Her voice broke slightly. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that is, to be dependent on your child's charity?" There it was, the core issue that no legal agreement or financial arrangement could fully address. Pride, independence, the reversal of parent-child roles that felt so unnatural, especially to someone like my mother who had built her identity around being the matriarch, the decision-maker. "It's not charity," I said gently. "It's a practical solution to a difficult situation. And you wouldn't need my permission for normal household changes. We'd put all that in writing." "And what about when you get married or move away? What happens to us then?" The questions caught me off guard. Mom rarely expressed concern about my future in terms that weren't critical of my single status or career focus. Was she actually worried about how my life changes might affect them? "The house would still be owned by the LLC," I explained. "My personal circumstances wouldn't change that. And we can build protections into the agreement to ensure your security, regardless of what happens in my life." She was quiet for a moment, and I could almost feel her searching for another objection, another reason to resist the inevitable. "Your cousin Stephanie called last night," she said finally, changing tactics. "She and David bought a vacation, home in Florida last year. They're offering to let us rent it for a very reasonable amount. We could move there instead." I bit my lip, weighing my response. Stephanie and David were financially comfortable, but hardly in a position to subsidize my parents' housing long-term. And Florida was nearly 1,000 miles from Chicago, from their doctors, friends, support system, and most importantly, from Michael and me. "That's generous of them," I said carefully. "But is that really what you want? To leave your home, your community, everything familiar?" "Maybe it's time for a fresh start," she replied, but her voice lacked conviction. "People retire to Florida all the time." "They do, but usually with adequate retirement savings and a plan. Running away won't solve the underlying issues, Mom. So now I'm running away?" The edge returned to her voice. "Just because I don't want to accept your controlling offer?" I took a deep breath, reminding myself that her anger came from fear. "It's not about control. It's about finding a sustainable solution. But if Florida is what you truly want, I won't stand in your way. Just please make sure you understand all the implications before making such a big change." Our conversation continued in circles for nearly an hour, neither of us fully conceding ground. By the time we hung up, I wasn't sure what she'd decided, only that she was conflicted and frightened beneath her combative exterior. I texted Dad again. "Just spoke with Mom. She mentioned Florida?" His reply was prompt but unhelpful. "She's exploring options. See you tomorrow evening." I arrived. At work, distracted, and remained so throughout the day. During lunch, I researched senior living options in Florida, just in case Mom's scheme gained traction. The costs were sobering, even for the most modest arrangements. Without significant retirement savings, my parents would struggle anywhere, Chicago, Florida, or the moon. Geography wouldn't change their financial reality. That evening, I called Michael to fill him in on the latest developments. Florida? He echoed, disbelief evident in his voice. That's her brilliant alternative? Apparently, Stephanie and David offered their vacation home at a reduced rent. For how long? A month? A year? Forever? He snorted. This is classic mom, grasping at straws rather than accepting reality. I know, but part of me understands why she's resistant. Becoming their landlord does change our relationship, no matter how we structure it. Michael was quiet for a moment. You know what I think? I think this isn't really about the house or being your tenant. It's about Mom finally having to admit she's not in control anymore, that her financial choices have consequences she can't charm or manipulate her way out of. His insight resonated uncomfortably. Mom had always been the family force of nature, bending others to her will through sheer persistence and emotional leverage. Her financial difficulties were perhaps the first immovable object her unstoppable force had truly encountered. Maybe you're right, I conceded. But knowing that doesn't solve the immediate problem. No, but it might help you stay centered when she tries to pull you into her emotional tornado tomorrow. The next evening, I arrived at my parents' house with a folder containing Olivia's preliminary paperwork, a simplified explanation of the LLC structure, and a draft rental agreement that emphasized their autonomy while establishing necessary boundaries. I'd prepared for every objection I could anticipate, rehearsing responses that were firm but compassionate. What I hadn't prepared for was finding the house dark and empty. I rang the doorbell, then knocked, peering through windows that revealed unlit rooms. Using my key, I entered cautiously, calling out for my parents. No response. No note on the kitchen counter or the refrigerator where family communications were typically left. A quick tour of the house showed nothing obviously missing. No empty closets or cleared-out drawers to suggest they'd fled. Their cars weren't in the garage, but that could mean anything. I tried calling both their cell phones. Both went straight to voicemail. Fighting rising panic, I called Michael. They're not here. No note, no explanation, nothing. Maybe they went out to dinner? He suggested, though his tone revealed he didn't believe it any more than I did. Without leaving a message when they knew I was coming over? That's not like Dad, even if Mom might pull something like that. Let me call some of their friends, he offered. See if anyone knows anything. I paced the living room while waiting for Michael to call back, noting small details I hadn't observed during our tense dinner discussions. New throw pillows on the sofa, clearly recent purchases. A stack of travel magazines on the coffee table. The framed family photos that had always stood on the mantel were missing, with faint dust outlines showing where they'd been. Michael called back within 15 minutes. Nancy says they stopped by around noon to drop off some dishes they'd borrowed. Mom mentioned they were taking a short trip but would be back for bridge club next week. A trip? Where? Nancy didn't ask, and Mom didn't volunteer it. I sank onto the sofa, mind racing through possibilities. You don't think they actually went to Florida, do you? To Stephanie's place? Possibly. It would be just like Mom to dramatically flee rather than face a difficult conversation. He paused. Have you checked their bedroom? Any packed suitcases? I hadn't thought to look there, respecting their privacy even in their absence. But Michael's suggestion made sense. I climbed the stairs to their room, finding the door slightly ajar. The bedroom appeared normal at first glance. Bed made with the quilt Mom had had since before I was born. Dad's reading glasses on his nightstand. Mom's vanity cluttered with cosmetics and jewelry. But the closet door stood open, revealing gaps in the usually crowded space. Both their larger suitcases were missing from their usual spot in the corner. Their suitcases are gone, I reported to Michael. And clothes are missing. Check the bathroom. See if their toiletries are gone too. Sure enough, the bathroom counter was cleared of the daily essentials: Dad's electric razor, Mom's expensive face creams, both their toothbrushes. This wasn't a spontaneous dinner out. They had planned to be gone for an extended period. "This is unbelievable," I fumed, returning to the bedroom to search for any clue to their destination. "Who does this? Who just disappears without a word?" "Our parents, apparently," Michael replied dryly. "Should we be worried? Or just angry?" It was a fair question. Part of me was furious at their childish evasion of responsibility. But another part, the part that had spent a lifetime managing their crises, was genuinely concerned. They were in their 60s, financially vulnerable, and potentially making rash decisions under emotional duress. "Both, I think," I admitted. "Let me look around a bit more, then we can decide next steps." I searched the usual hiding spots, where they kept important documents: the desk in the den, the drawer in Dad's nightstand, the recipe box in the kitchen that hadn't held an actual recipe in decades. Nothing seemed disturbed or missing. As I returned to the kitchen, a small white corner peeking out from beneath the microwave caught my attention. Pulling it free, I found an envelope with my name written in Dad's neat handwriting. Inside was a brief note. "Rachel, your mother needs time to process everything. We've gone to visit Stephanie for a few days. Please don't worry. We haven't made any permanent decisions yet. I'll call when we're ready to talk. Love, Dad." I read the note to Michael over the phone. "At least we know where they are," he said, relief evident in his voice. "And it sounds like Dad is still open to your proposal, even if Mom's being Mom about it." "I guess. But this feels so unnecessary. Running away to Florida instead of having an adult conversation? It's exhausting." "Welcome to the last 34 years of being their daughter," Michael said, his attempt at humor falling flat against my growing frustration. After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at Dad's note. The rational part of me understood this was just another delay tactic, another way for Mom to avoid facing reality. But the emotional part, the part that remained, despite everything, their dutiful daughter, felt a sharp sting of rejection. I'd liquidated investments, taken loans, and spent countless hours crafting a solution to save their home. And their response was to flee the state rather than discuss it with me directly. The pattern was so familiar it was almost comical. Create, crisis, reject help, manufacture drama, eventually accept help on their terms, repeat. Except this time, the stakes were too high for their usual dance. The foreclosure clock was ticking. Edward Harrison or someone like him was waiting to prey on their vulnerability. And my financial resources weren't infinite. I couldn't keep the purchase funds in limbo indefinitely while they processed. I called Olivia from the kitchen explaining the situation. Her reaction was professionally measured but personally indignant on my behalf. "This complicates things," she said. "The bank won't wait forever, even with the extension." "I know. What are my options?" "We can still proceed with the purchase, assuming they eventually agree. The delay shouldn't derail the process entirely." "But Rachel..." She hesitated. "Are you sure this is still what you want to do, given their reaction?" It was the question I'd been avoiding. Was I throwing good money after bad? Would purchasing their house actually solve anything? Or just enable another round of financial irresponsibility? "I don't know anymore," I admitted. "Part of me wants to walk away, let them face the consequences of their choices for once. But another part knows they'll end up homeless or in an even worse financial situation, and ultimately that will affect Michael and me anyway." "You need to decide what success looks like here," Olivia counseled. "Is it saving the house at all? Costs? Is it helping your parents achieve financial stability, even if that means a different living situation? Or is it finally establishing boundaries that protect your own financial future?" Her questions followed me home. echoing in my mind as I poured a glass of wine and tried to relax. What did success look like in this impossible situation? The answer had seemed so clear a few weeks ago. Save the house, stabilize their living situation, establish a sustainable path forward. Now, with their flight to Florida, everything felt murky again. A text from Dad came through just as I was preparing for bed. Made it to Stephanie's safely. Your mother needs a few days. I'm working on her. Sorry about tonight. I stared at the message, torn between relief that they'd arrived safely and frustration at the ongoing drama. Please keep me posted, I replied simply. The foreclosure timeline doesn't stop because you're in Florida. His response came quickly. I know. We'll call soon. 3 days passed with no further communication. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction of client meetings and project deadlines. On the 4th day, Denise stopped by my office just as I was packing up to leave. You're coming to happy hour, she declared. Not a question, but a statement of fact. The whole team's going to celebrate landing the Westfield account. No excuses. I started to decline automatically, my mind already on the evening's plans to review alternative foreclosure solutions with Olivia. But something in Denise's determined expression stopped me. When was the last time I'd done anything purely social? Anything not related to work or my parents' crisis? Okay, I found myself saying. One drink. One drink turned into 2, and 2 hours of normal conversation with colleagues, discussing weekend plans, favorite Netflix shows, and office gossip rather than foreclosure proceedings and retirement funding. It felt like stepping into someone else's life temporarily, and I realized with a pang how much of my own life had been consumed by my parents' problems. As I was leaving the bar, my phone rang with Dad's number. I stepped outside to the relative quiet of the sidewalk to answer. Oh, hey Dad, how's Florida? Hot, he said, sounding tired. Listen, Rachel, your mother and I have been talking. A lot, and we've made some decisions. My stomach tightened. What kind of decisions? We're not coming back to Chicago right away. Stephanie has offered to let us stay here through the summer while we figure things out. I leaned against the brick wall of the building, trying to process this unexpected development. What about the house? The foreclosure? He sighed heavily. That's what I wanted to discuss. We're not going to fight it anymore. Let the bank take the house. What? I nearly shouted, drawing curious glances from passers-by. Dad, you can't just... What? About all your things? Your life there? Stephanie is helping us arrange for a moving company to pack up what we want to keep. The rest. Well, it's just stuff, isn't it? Just stuff. The home they'd lived in for 30 years. The garden. Dad had tenderly cultivated. The kitchen where Mom had taught me to bake. The staircase where we'd taken first day of school photos every September. Just stuff. This is Mom's idea, isn't it? I couldn't keep the accusation from my voice. Her way of avoiding my help because it comes with responsibility attached. Rachel, he said gently, this isn't about rejecting your help. We appreciate everything you've tried to do. But sometimes the best solution is to start fresh. Your mother is happier here than I've seen her in years. The weather is easier on my back. Stephanie has a network of friends our age. And how exactly are you planning to afford living in Florida long term? Stephanie's generosity has limits, and so does your income. He hesitated. We're exploring options. Senior communities here are actually quite affordable compared to Chicago. Affordable with what money, Dad? Your Social Security and pension barely covered your expenses in Chicago. Florida isn't magically cheaper just because it's sunny. I know it's a lot to take in, he said, sidestepping my question. But we really think this is for the best. A clean break. A clean break. The phrase felt like a slap. What they meant was a break from responsibility, from consequences, and possibly from me. the uncomfortable reminder of financial reality. "What about the money I've already committed to buying the house?" I asked. "The loans I've taken? The savings I've liquidated?" Another pause. "We hoped you might use it for a down payment on your own place, that condo you've been talking about for years." The irony was almost too much. After draining my condo savings to save their house, they were now suggesting I use the remaining funds for myself, as if this had been their generous plan all along, rather than a last-minute justification for abandoning ship. "I need to process this," I said finally, my voice tight. "We'll talk more later." After hanging up, I stood on the sidewalk, staring blankly at the evening traffic. Around me, people were starting their weekends, meeting friends, heading to dinner, normal lives unfolding without the particular brand of chaos that seemed to follow my family. I texted Michael. "They're staying in Florida, abandoning the house to foreclosure. Call me when you can." His response was immediate. "WTF? Calling now." Our conversation was a mixture of disbelief, anger, and reluctant acceptance. Michael, always quicker to establish boundaries, was less surprised than I was. "Classic mom," he said multiple times. "Finding an escape hatch when responsibilities get too real." "But what about their future?" I pressed. "They have no savings, no plan beyond Stephanie's temporary generosity." "That sounds like a them problem, not a you problem," he replied bluntly. "You tried, Rachel, above and beyond. Sometimes you have to let adults face the consequences of their choices." My mind flashed to all the times I'd sworn to do exactly that, to stop rescuing, to let natural consequences teach what my interventions couldn't. Yet here I was again, worrying about their welfare even as they actively rejected my help. I should be relieved, I admitted. No more house purchase, no more being their landlord. I can refocus on my own financial goals. But I'm still worried, and honestly, I'm hurt. I've spent months trying to help them and they just left, without even a proper conversation. Michael's voice softened. "I know, it sucks. But maybe this is the universe forcing a healthier dynamic between you guys. Distance might be good for all of you right now." The next morning, I met with Olivia to unwind the financial arrangements for the house purchase. She didn't try to hide her disapproval of my parents' actions, but her focus remained practical. "You'll be able to recover most of the initial outlay," she assured me. "There will be some fees we can't recoup, but overall, your financial position won't be significantly impacted." "That's something, at least," I said, signing the paperwork she'd prepared to halt the purchase process. "And emotionally?" she asked, her professional demeanor giving way to friendly concern. "How are you handling their decision?" I considered the question carefully. How was I feeling? Angry, certainly. Hurt, definitely. But beneath those expected reactions was something else. Something that felt surprisingly like relief. I think I'm actually okay," I said slowly, the realization dawning as I spoke. "For the first time in my adult life, I'm completely off the hook for fixing their problems. They've made their choice, and it doesn't involve me." Olivia studied me. "And you're really okay with that? With letting them potentially make another financial mistake?" I don't know if okay is the right word, but I'm accepting it. They're adults who have the right to make their own decisions, even bad ones. And I'm an adult who gets to prioritize my own financial health and peace of mind. She smiled. "That sounds like progress to me." Over the following weeks, I watched from a distance, both literally and emotionally, as my parents' life in Chicago unraveled. They arranged for movers to pack essential items and ship them to Florida. They made no attempt to sell the house or negotiate with the bank, simply walking away from their underwater mortgage. Dad called weekly with updates that were carefully edited to emphasize the positives of their Florida adventure while glossing over the practical challenges. Mom sent occasional texts with photos of Florida sunsets and Stephanie's pool, as if we were simply experiencing an extended family vacation rather than a major life upheaval prompted by financial irresponsibility. Neither of them mentioned money directly, though Dad occasionally alluded to exploring senior living options in the area. 1 month after their abrupt departure, I received a call from the bank handling their foreclosure. Apparently, I was still listed as an alternate contact. Ms. Carter, we wanted to inform you that the property at 547 Oakwood Lane will be auctioned next month. Yes, I'm aware. My parents have relocated and don't intend to contest the foreclosure. I see. The representative's voice held no judgment, just professional efficiency. And the outstanding balance? Will they be making arrangements to address that? I almost laughed at the naivety of the question. No, they won't. They've essentially walked away from the property entirely. Brief silence. I understand. Well, after the auction, any remaining balance will be treated as a deficiency, which could potentially lead to collection actions or credit impacts. I'm sure it will, I said, a strange calm settling over me. You should direct any further communication to them directly. I'm no longer involved in their financial matters. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd first discovered their mortgage troubles nearly a year ago. The cycle of crisis and rescue that had defined our relationship for so long had finally been broken, not by my boundary setting, but by their flight. The house where I'd grown up would soon belong to strangers. My parents were starting over in Florida with no financial foundation, dependent on the generosity of relatives. And I was free. Free to rebuild my savings, to pursue the condo I'd deferred for years, to live my life without the constant undercurrent of anxiety about their next financial disaster. It wasn't the resolution I'd worked toward, not the careful plan I'd crafted to help them maintain dignity and security in their retirement. But perhaps it was the resolution we all needed. A clean break indeed, though not in the way they'd meant it. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Found the perfect little rental not far from Stephanie, ready to put down a deposit. So excited for this new chapter. I stared at the message, wondering where they'd found money for a deposit when they couldn't manage their mortgage payments, wondering if they'd disclosed their foreclosure to potential landlords, wondering how long this particular fantasy would last before reality intruded again. But for the first time, these weren't my problems to solve. I typed a simple reply. Sounds nice. Hope it works out for you. Then I set down my phone and opened my laptop to the bookmark I'd saved months ago. Listings for condos in my price range. It was time to focus on my own future, whatever theirs might hold. 6 months after my parents' abrupt departure to Florida, I stood in the bright, sunlit kitchen of my new condo, unpacking dishes while my realtor, Jenna, leaned against the granite countertop. So? How does it feel to be a homeowner? She asked, handing me a glass of champagne she'd brought to celebrate the closing. I paused, carefully considering the question. How did it feel? After years of putting my own dreams on hold while managing my parents' financial chaos, after months of false starts and redirected savings, after finally prioritizing my own future, how did it feel? Surreal, I admitted, accepting the glass. Good surreal, but still. I've been working toward this for so long that it doesn't quite feel real yet. Jenna smiled knowingly. Give it a week. Once you've slept here, made your first meal, had your first minor homeowner crisis, then it'll feel real. Minor crisis? I raised an eyebrow. Nothing builds ownership like a leaky faucet at 2 a.m. She laughed. But seriously, Rachel, you should be proud. This place is gorgeous, and you made it happen despite everything. Despite everything. The phrase encompassed so much. The foreclosure drama, the abandoned rescue plan, the emotional fallout, the necessary rebuilding of my finances. But Jenna was right. Despite everything, I was here, in my own home, a sleek two-bedroom condo in a neighborhood I loved, with enough space for both comfortable living and a home office. After Jenna left, I continued unpacking, letting my mind wander over the tumultuous months since my parents had chosen Florida over financial reality. Their defection had forced me to redirect my focus inward, to examine what I truly wanted for my own life rather than how I could rescue theirs. The answer had come with surprising clarity. This condo, a home base that was truly mine in the city I loved. Not the borrowed stability of a rental, not the temporary shelter of an apartment, but a permanent address that represented my values and priorities. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Did you sign? Is it officially yours?" I snapped. A photo of myself standing in the kitchen, keys dangling from my fingers, and sent it with the caption, "Homeowner status achieved." He responded immediately with a string of celebratory emojis. "Congrats, sis! When's the housewarming?" "Give me a week to unpack and paint, then I'll host properly." It felt good to be excited about something so normal, so positive. No crisis. Management, no financial rescues. Just a regular milestone celebration with the people I cared about. As if summoned by my thoughts of family, my phone rang with Mom's number. I hesitated before answering, steel myself for whatever drama might be unfolding in Florida. "Rachel, darling." Her voice was bright, almost manic in its cheer. "How's the move going? All settled in your new place?" I blinked, taken aback by her apparently genuine interest. During our infrequent calls over the past months, she'd rarely asked about my life, focusing instead on the details of her Florida adventures. "Just started unpacking, actually. The movers left a couple hours ago." "I'm sure it's lovely. You always did have good taste." There was an awkward pause before she continued. "Your father and I have some news, too." Here it comes, I thought, mentally preparing for whatever new crisis was about to be unveiled. "We've found a senior living community we really like. It's called Palm Grove. Very nice. Not too fancy, but clean and well-maintained. They have different levels of care. So as we get older, we won't have to move again." I processed this information slowly, searching for the catch. "That sounds sensible. How are you planning to afford it?" The question was direct, perhaps blunt, but after everything, I felt entitled to clarity. "That's actually why I'm calling." Another pause. The house finally sold at auction. There was some money left over after the bank took their portion. Not much, but enough for a modest down payment on a small unit at Palm Grove. The house. My childhood home, the center of so much conflict and anguish, reduced to the house in casual conversation. I felt a pang of something. Not quite sadness, not quite anger, but a complex emotion I couldn't immediately name. "I didn't realize foreclosure auctions could result in excess funds," I said carefully. "Neither did we. Apparently the market in that area has improved significantly. The bank got their money, and we received about $30,000. $30,000. After decades of home ownership, 3 decades of payments and refinancing and equity extraction, that's what remained of their largest investment. Barely enough for a down payment on what was essentially an apartment for seniors. The monthly fees are still a stretch," Mom continued, her voice losing some of its artificial brightness. "But Stephanie has offered to help for the first year while we get settled. More assistance from cousin Stephanie, who had somehow become their financial savior. I wondered how long her generosity would last, how many times she'd be asked to help out temporarily before she, too, established boundaries. "What about long-term?" I asked. "Senior communities typically have substantial monthly fees." Mom sighed. "We're working on that. Your father's considering a part-time job at the community center, and I might do some tutoring. They're always looking for retired teachers." The idea of my parents, now in their mid-60s, taking jobs to cover basic living expenses was sobering. But it was also, I had to admit, the first realistic approach to their finances they'd shown in years. "That sounds like a solid plan," I said, meaning it. "I'm glad you're thinking ahead." "We should have done that years ago," she admitted quietly. "If we had." She trailed off, leaving the thought unfinished. If they had planned ahead, they wouldn't have lost their home. They wouldn't have fled to Florida in a panic. They wouldn't have spent decades cycling through financial crises. We both knew the truth, but the fact that she was acknowledging it, even obliquely, felt significant. "Anyway," she continued, rallying back to her usual briskness, "we wanted to let you know, and to apologize for how we left things. It wasn't right, running off like that after all you tried to do." The apology, unexpected and unprecedented, left me momentarily speechless. In our family dynamic, Mom never apologized. She justified, explained, deflected, but never simply owned her mistakes. "Thank you," I said finally. "That means a lot." "Your father wants to talk to you too," she said, and I heard rustling as the phone changed hands. "Rachel!" Dad's voice, warmer and more familiar than Mom's, came through clearly. "Congratulations on the condo. We're proud of you." "Thanks, Dad." I leaned against my new kitchen counter, emotionally wrong-footed by this turn in the conversation. "Mom told me about Palm Grove. It sounds like a good fit." "It is," he agreed. "Not what we'd planned, of course, but appropriate for our situation." He paused, then added, "I want you to know something. After we ran away, let's be honest, I did a lot of thinking about how we ended up here. The choices we made, the opportunities we missed to correct course." I waited, sensing he needed to say more without interruption. "Your mother and I, we've never been good with money. That's obvious, I know. But more than that, we've never been good at facing reality when it's uncomfortable. We kept hoping something would change. A big inheritance, a market shift, some stroke of luck that would fix everything without us having to change our habits or expectations." "Dad, please, let me finish," he said gently. "You tried to help us face reality multiple times, and we rejected that help, not because it wasn't valuable, but because accepting it meant acknowledging our failures, particularly for your mother, that is incredibly difficult." The depth of his self-awareness caught me off guard. This wasn't the passive, conflict-avoiding father I'd known my whole life, but someone more reflective, more willing to confront painful truths. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "But why now? What's changed?" He chuckled softly. "Besides losing our home, depleting our resources, and ending up dependent on relatives in another state, nothing much." Despite everything, I laughed. "Too. Fair point. But seriously, Rachel, sometimes rock bottom is clarifying. We hit ours, and now we're trying to rebuild with more realism. Which brings me to another reason for this call." Here it was, the ask, the need, the crisis that would pull me back into their financial orbit just as I was establishing my independence. "We'd like to come visit," he said simply. "See your new place. Spend some time together before we move. Into Palm Grove next month, if that's something you'd be open to." I blinked, wrong-footed again. Not a request for money or assistance, but for connection. "I'd like that," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "Maybe once I'm settled, in a couple of weeks?" "Perfect. We'll make our own arrangements, get a hotel nearby." He emphasized the point subtly. They weren't assuming they'd stay with me, another small indicator of newly developing boundaries. After we hung up, I stood in my half-unpacked kitchen, trying to process the conversation. Their situation remained precarious, dependent on Stephanie's generosity, hoping for part-time jobs that might not materialize. moving into a senior community they could barely afford. But something fundamental had shifted in how they approached that precariousness. There was a new recognition of reality, a willingness to work within constraints rather than deny them. Would it last? I couldn't know. Habits formed over decades don't disappear in 6 months, no matter how clarifying the rock bottom. But for the first time, I felt cautiously optimistic that they might be capable of change. As promised, my parents visited 2 weeks later. I'd spent the intervening time settling into my condo, painting the second bedroom a serene blue for my home office, arranging furniture, and making the space truly mine. The night before their arrival, I cleaned meticulously, not out of anxiety about their judgment, but from a desire to showcase the home I'd created for myself. They arrived on a sunny Saturday morning, Dad looking thinner but healthier than when they'd left Chicago, Mom more relaxed despite the lingering awkwardness between us. I gave them a tour of the condo, noting with pleasure how Dad admired the crown molding and updated kitchen, how Mom commented appreciatively on the natural light in the living room. "It suits you," she said, running her hand along the quartz countertop. "Elegant, but practical." "That's the nicest thing you've ever said about my taste," I teased, surprised by my ability to joke with her. She smiled ruefully. "I haven't always been good at seeing you clearly, have I? Too busy projecting what I wanted to see." The self-awareness startled me again. Florida seemed to have initiated some profound changes, not just in their circumstances, but in their perspectives. We spent the day exploring my neighborhood, having lunch at my favorite cafe, and walking along the lakefront. The conversation remained carefully distant from financial specifics, focusing instead on Dad's improving health in the warmer climate, Mom's new friends in Florida, and my recent promotion at work. It wasn't until dinner at a restaurant near their hotel that Dad broached the subject I'd been both expecting and dreading. "We've been doing a lot of financial planning for this move to Palm Grove," he said as we waited for our entrees. "Really? Trying to understand what we can afford long term." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "That's good. Senior communities can be expensive." "They are," Mom agreed. "Even the modest ones. We've had to be realistic about what our income can support." "Stephanie helped us connect with a financial advisor," Dad continued. "A legitimate one," he added with a small smile, acknowledging the Edward Harrison debacle. "She's helped us create a budget based on our Social Security, my pension, and the small amount we have left from the house sale." "It's tight," Mom admitted. "Very tight. Even with part-time work, we'll be just getting by." I waited, bracing myself for what would inevitably follow. A subtle or not-so-subtle request for assistance, a hint about their difficult circumstances, a reminder of my comfortable salary and lack of dependence. "Which is why," Dad continued, "we want to make something very clear. Here it comes," I thought. "We will not be asking you for financial help," he said firmly. "Not now, not in the future. Whatever challenges we face, we'll manage on our own or with the resources available to seniors in our situation." I stared at him, genuinely shocked. This wasn't a lead-up to an ask. It was a declaration of independence, the opposite of what our dynamic had been my entire adult life. "Dad, Please, Rachel, let me finish. This is important." He reached for Mom's hand, and she nodded encouragingly. "We've taken advantage of your generosity for years. We've placed burdens on you that were never yours to carry. That stops now." "We've made arrangements," Mom added. "Advance directives, power of attorney for healthcare, all the legal documents to ensure you won't be saddled with difficult decisions or financial responsibilities if our health declines." I felt tears threatening and blinked rapidly to contain them. This preemptive boundary setting, this acknowledgement of their past patterns and deliberate choice to change them, it was more than I'd ever expected. "What if you really need help?" I asked, my voice slightly strained. What if there's a true emergency? Then we'll access social services, Medicare, whatever assistance is available, Dad replied. We've researched options extensively. Our financial advisor has connected us with resources specifically for seniors on limited incomes. And if those aren't enough? Mom leaned forward. Then we'll adjust our expectations and lifestyle accordingly. Rachel, we spent decades making poor financial choices and expecting others, particularly you, to help us avoid the consequences. That wasn't fair, and it wasn't healthy for any of us. I sat back, processing their words. This wasn't the tentative, hesitant change I'd cautiously hoped for. This was a fundamental reset of our relationship, initiated not by me through boundary setting, but by them through self-reflection. I don't know what to say, I admitted finally. You don't need to say anything, Dad assured me. Just know that whatever relationship we build moving forward, it won't be clouded by financial dependence or expectation. We want to be your parents, not your dependents. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of more ordinary conversation, but underneath, I felt a profound shift in the ground beneath our family dynamic. For the first time in memory, I wasn't bracing for a crisis, calculating what resources I could spare, or planning how to balance their needs against my own. The freedom was both exhilarating and disorienting. Back at my condo after dinner, I called Michael to share the conversation. They said, "What?" he asked incredulously. "No financial help ever? Are these body snatchers pretending to be our parents?" I know, right? I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it never did. They seem to have actually changed. Color me skeptical, Michael said. People don't fundamentally change in their 60s, especially not around something as deeply ingrained as their relationship with money. His skepticism was reasonable, echoing my own lingering doubts. Maybe not fundamentally, but the foreclosure, the move to Florida, those were pretty seismic disruptions. Maybe enough to shift their perspectives. I hope you're right, he conceded. But protect yourself, Rach. Don't get pulled back in just because they're saying all the right things in this moment. His warning was fair, but as the days passed, after my parents' visit, I found myself cautiously embracing the possibility that real change had occurred. Our phone calls remained pleasant, focusing on everyday life rather than crises. When Mom mentioned a plumbing issue in their rental, she followed it immediately with their solution, not a hint for assistance. When Dad talked about the down payment they'd need for Palm Grove, he described how they were budgeting from their existing resources. 3 weeks after their visit, I received a large envelope in the mail with Florida postmarks. Inside were legal documents, copies of their advance directives, power of attorney for healthcare naming Michael and me as alternates for each other, and a letter from their financial advisor confirming the arrangements they'd mentioned during dinner. Included was a handwritten note from Mom. Rachel, I know words alone can't repair the patterns of years, so I wanted you to have concrete evidence of our commitment to change. These documents ensure that our choices moving forward won't become your burdens. For too long, I convinced myself that my financial irresponsibility was justified because I'd sacrificed for my children. The truth, which took losing our home to finally see, is that parents are supposed to provide for their children. It's not a sacrifice. It's the basic duty we accept when bringing life into the world. And children aren't obligated to provide for parents who failed to plan responsibly for their own futures. You tried to help us face reality, and we rejected it because it was too painful to acknowledge our failures. I'm sorry for that, and for all the times we've pulled you into crises of our own making. Your new home looks wonderful. It reflects who you are. Thoughtful, practical, but also warm and welcoming. Build your life there without worrying about rescuing ours. We'll be okay, one way or another. Love, Mom. I sat on my sofa, reading the note 3 times, each time catching nuances I'd missed initially. The acknowledgement of their patterns, The absence of subtle guilt trips or manipulations, the genuine release from obligation. It was unprecedented in our relationship. Was it perfect? No. They were still financially vulnerable, still dependent to some degree on Stephanie's generosity, still facing a retirement with minimal resources. But they were facing those challenges directly rather than avoiding them or expecting rescue. And I was free, not just financially but emotionally, to build my own life without the constant undertow of their needs pulling me off course. Free to save for my own future, to travel, to pursue relationships without the complication of potential financial entanglements with my parents. 2 months later, my parents moved into Palm Grove. They sent photos of their small but cheerful apartment, modest compared to their Chicago home but suited to their current reality. Dad had indeed secured a part-time position at the community center, and Mom was tutoring 3 afternoons a week at a nearby elementary school. Their income was limited but sufficient for their basic needs, supplemented by the social activities included in their Palm Grove fees. I flew down for a weekend to help them settle in, bringing housewarming gifts, practical items for their kitchen, comfortable throws for the living room, but no financial assistance. They didn't ask, and I didn't offer. Instead, we focused on arranging furniture, hanging pictures, making their new space comfortable and personal. On my last evening there, we sat on their small patio, watching the Florida sunset paint the sky in dramatic oranges and pinks. Mom brought out glasses of iced tea, settling beside me while Dad tended to the small container garden he'd started, herbs and flowers adapted to the tropical climate. "It's not what we imagined for retirement," Mom said quietly, following my gaze to Dad's careful watering of the plants. "But there's peace in it, in finally living within our means." I nodded, understanding completely. "There's dignity in it too." "Yes," she agreed thoughtfully. "More than in running from creditors or depending on our children." She turned to face me directly. "Are you happy, Rachel? With your life? Your work? Your new home?" The question was genuine, without the undercurrent of comparison or competition that had often characterized her interest in my life. "I am," I answered honestly. "More so recently, knowing that you and Dad are stable and taking care of yourselves." "We should have done that long ago." She sipped her tea, watching the darkening sky. "But perhaps we all arrive at wisdom in our own time, however belatedly." Dad joined us, settling into the third patio chair with a contented sigh. "Garden's coming along nicely. Not like the one back in Chicago, but suitable for this climate." We sat in comfortable silence as twilight deepened, 3 adults with a complicated history finding a new equilibrium. The past couldn't be erased. The financial chaos, the emotional manipulation, the abandonment and crisis. But it could be acknowledged and, perhaps, transcended. As I packed the next morning for my flight home, Dad helped carry my suitcase to the rental car. "We're going to be okay, you know," he said, closing the trunk. "You don't need to worry about us anymore." "I know," I replied, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "But I'll probably worry a little anyway. It's a hard habit to break." He smiled, understanding in his eyes. "Just make it a small part of your life, not the driving force. You've earned the right to prioritize your own future." I had. After years of putting their needs first, of delaying my own goals to manage their crises, I'd finally claimed the space to build my own secure foundation. My condo waited in Chicago. My career was advancing steadily, and for the first time, my savings were growing without interruption from family emergencies. The drive to the airport felt symbolic, me moving forward independently while they remained in the life they'd chosen, not abandoned or neglected, but appropriately separate. Our weekly calls would continue, our relationship would evolve, but the dynamics that had defined us for so long had fundamentally changed. As the plane lifted off, carrying me back to Chicago and my own life, I felt a sense of completion, of circles closing properly. My parents had demanded I fund their retirement, triggering a chain of events that ultimately led not to financial entanglement, but to mutual independence. It wasn't the ending any of us had anticipated, but perhaps it was the one we all needed. Oh, chance to rewrite our roles, to become more fully ourselves without the weight of unhealthy patterns anchoring us to old behaviors. In my condo that evening, I stood at the window watching the Chicago skyline glitter against the night sky. My home, my life, my future, unburdened by the past, but enriched by the lessons it had taught us all. Whatever challenges lay ahead, for me, for my parents, for our evolving relationship, we would face them from this new foundation of clearer boundaries, greater self-awareness, and mutual respect for each other's independence. It wasn't perfect, but it was, finally, enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.